2024 quarterback class is shaping up to be one of the best ones that we've seen in years. I'm going to break down the 16 early season quarterbacks impressing me into 5 tiers coming your way right now. It's lonely at the top here. Only one player is going to be featured in tier 1, and that is, of course, USC's Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has done nothing to suggest that he is anything but the first overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft, and he is going to be the consensus 101 in all Superflex formats. Caleb Williams has completed 78% of his 70 passing attempts through the first 3 games of the season. He's thrown 12 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, and he's racked up 878 passing yards. Williams has done that primarily playing in just the first half of his games against San Jose State, Nevada, and Stanford. Now, Caleb Williams is a dual threat quarterback. He's a playmaker. He improvises well, and he has some of the best arm talent we've seen from a prospect in years. It makes him a serious fantasy football difference maker. If Caleb Williams was in a startup dynasty draft that was happening today, he would be a first-round draft pick, and I equate his value in a dynasty Devy league right now. You'd have to trade Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, that type of quarterback to be able to realistically acquire Caleb Williams, whose value is only going to continue to soar over the next few months. Tier 2 is where it gets really interesting. There's 4 quarterbacks that I currently consider to be in tier 2, and all 4 of those quarterbacks are in that tier because they have a realistic chance of being drafted in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. Some of these guys are absolute locks to be first round draft picks. Others are rising up the boards through the first month of the college football season. But let's go ahead and get into it here. The 4 quarterbacks that I'm putting in tier 2 of the 2024 quarterback class are Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Quinn Ewers, and Shedeur Sanders. And yes, they are currently featured on the rookie big board in that order. I should mention here before I jump into this tier that if you want access to the full rookie big board and my full in-depth tiers for all the position groups of the 2024 class, you can head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard. And the link is in the episode comments here, or the episode description. So getting into it here, early on in the season, Drake May was considered by many to be in the same tier as Caleb Williams, kind of a 1A, 1B situation. And if we're talking about NFL draft capital, I do think Drake May is still locked into, at the very least, be a top 20 NFL draft selection, more likely a top 10 selection. And a lot of folks right now would tell you that he's a lock to be a top 5 NFL draft selection. I got to say, though, things have gone a little slower than I expected early on in the season for the UNC quarterback. Now, you look at Drake May here through his first 3 games of the season. He has completed 72% of his passes for 891 yards, but he has a 4 touchdown to 4 interception ratio. Now, if you watched any of my preseason content or your Rookie Big Board patron, you know I'm a little bit lower than consensus on Drake May. And I want to clarify, I'm not out on Drake May. I think he's a great quarterback prospect, but he's not quite, in terms of his mechanics, he's not quite there still. And now we're starting to see questions around that processing and decision making. He's got a big arm, and when he's locked in and in rhythm, it's difficult to stop Drake May. But the question marks are adding up here, and you have to proceed with at least a little bit of caution, which is why he's in tier 2 for me and not tier 1. Now, the next 3 guys I'm going to talk about are all players who have impressed early on in the season, starting here with Michigan's JJ McCarthy. Now, JJ McCarthy did have a rough go of things against Bowling Green in week 3, but prior to that, in the first 2 weeks of the season, he looked like an absolute surefire first-round NFL draft pick. Over the first couple weeks of the season, it was the eyes more than the box score that I focused on with JJ McCarthy, because he looked like he was a much improved passer. Great velocity, consistent mechanics. He was leading his wide receivers around the field with good anticipation, and he looked very calm, poised, and under control. The big question with JJ McCarthy is how is he going to hold up against Big Ten defenses? If he continues to play like he did over the first 2 weeks of the season, once he gets into his full Big Ten schedule, faces some of these tougher defenses like Penn State, Ohio State, if he is able to go out there and perform, it doesn't even have to be at an elite level, just at a high level. He's going to be garnering a lot of national attention, and I do still expect that JJ McCarthy will be a first-round NFL draft pick. The guy who's already probably played his most important game of the season is Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers, of course, made a national statement for his draft stock against the Alabama Crimson Tide when he led the Longhorns into Tuscaloosa and pulled off that upset victory. But it wasn't just getting the win, it was how Quinn Ewers got the victory in that game. Ewers went 24 for 38. He had 349 passing yards against the Crimson Tide, completing 63% of his attempts, 3 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. He looked in sync as a passer. The footwork looked a lot more consistent than I saw in his 2022 tape. The arm talent was on full display. And folks, remember, arm talent is not just throwing how hard you can throw the ball, right? It's being able to adjust velocities, put more air under the ball when needed, zip it more when needed, and understanding how to lead your receivers. And we saw him be able to adjust those velocities. We saw that moonshot, right, for that big touchdown, giving Xavier Worthy time to really run under the ball, taking advantage of his track star wide receiver. So Quinn Ewers does seem to be more in sync with his wide receivers this season, and that's going to bode very well for his draft stock. The last quarterback here in tier 2 is, of course, the one that's garnering all the national attention. And I promise I didn't put him in the video just for the SEO boost, but we have to talk about Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback out of Colorado. His early season performance has certainly caught the eyes of many, myself included, and he has certainly jumped up the rookie big board rankings. Now, he hasn't jumped up so far that he is a locked-in first-round pick for me, a la a guy like Mel Kiper, who has come out and said that. Kiper has suggested that if Shedeur Sanders was in the 2024 draft, he'd be a first-round pick. And if he was in the 2025 draft, he'd be the number 1 overall pick, right? And Shedeur Sanders will have the opportunity to choose whether he wants to leave for the NFL draft after this year or return for a final season of eligibility with the Buffaloes next year. But let's focus on the idea that he enters the 2024 NFL draft. Top 15, top 10 selection, it's absolutely within the possibilities. I think if the draft happens today, he's in that 20s range, right? Still, really good draft capital projection for the quarterback. What I've seen over the first few weeks from Shedeur Sanders is a quarterback that looks comfortable in the pocket. He works well through his reads. Another guy that displays good arm talent. He understands how to adjust velocities. Now, he doesn't have the strongest arm, and that's okay. We've seen from NFL quarterbacks be successful without having ultra arm strength, right? That is perfectly fine in today's NFL, but you have to be able to process, you have to be able to lead your wide receivers, and that's what Shedeur Sanders is doing. He sticks in the pocket. He has good pocket presence. He takes a lot of sacks. That's not his fault. I think he shows a lot of grit, a lot of leadership there, staying in the pocket under pressure, making the passes that he needs to, and he certainly shows a lot of durability going to the ground a lot for the Buffaloes, playing behind a really tough offensive line. Shedeur Sanders is certainly on the rise, and he certainly deserves to be in the conversation with these 3 other quarterbacks from tier 2. All in all, tiers 1 and 2, those top 5 guys, they all have the opportunity to go in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft, which in and of itself makes it a really strong class. Now, tier 3 of this conversation is my favorite tier because these are the guys I think still have so much variability to where their stock is going to end up. I do think NFL teams are going to be interested in drafting these 3 guys and potentially putting top 100 draft capital into them. And if one of them gets hot, maybe even another top 50 NFL draft selection, which if you're counting up here, realistically could put us at 6 quarterbacks in the top 50. It sounds aggressive, but it's within the realm of possibility. So let's start here with Oregon quarterback Bo Nix. Now, if you've been following college football, Devy fantasy football, just the NFL draft process over the last 4 or 5 years, you know that it's been a roller coaster with quarterback Bo Nix. He was a 5-star legacy recruit to Auburn, started as a true freshman and really impressed, and then struggled even further with the coaching staff once Gus Malzahn left, and ended up at UCF. With Brian Harsin at Auburn, the whole team didn't work, and Bo Nix certainly didn't work. He transfers to Oregon, and under Kenny Dillingham last season, he breaks out, looks like the 5-star quarterback that we've wanted to see. And now this year, even without Kenny Dillingham, he has come out and looked super impressive. So over his first 3 games, Bo Nix has totaled 893 passing yards. He's completed 77% of his 98 passing attempts. He has 8 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. If you've noticed a trend, folks, of all of these quarterbacks that are impressing me early in the season, they're protecting the ball. That is such an important thing, not only for a college football quarterback to do to help his team win, but NFL scouts and NFL front offices absolutely want to see that. And from a fantasy football perspective, nothing will keep a rookie or a young NFL quarterback off the field more than not being able to keep the ball in his offense's hands. So it's absolutely something we need to be paying attention to as well. Next up in this conversation is going to be Sam Hartman, the quarterback out of Notre Dame. I got to tell you, I was interested in Sam Hartman coming into the season. The idea of this guy that has a high football IQ, maybe not the best arm talent, but he can hang around the NFL for a while. Well, over the first couple of games of the season, I think Sam Hartman's making a better argument to be a top 100 selection as opposed to a day 3 selection. You look at his performance here in his first 4 games of the season, he's completed 71% of his 90 passing attempts for over 1,000 yards, 1,061 passing yards. He has 13 passing touchdowns, and you might have guessed it, 0 interceptions. Hartman's also found the end zone twice on the ground, so he's shown off a little bit of mobility. Now remember, Sam Hartman was known for playing in the slow mesh offense. It's a super unique offense, and that limitation most likely would have held him back in the eyes of NFL scouts because it doesn't reflect what he would realistically run for an NFL offense. The Notre Dame offense, though, is much more pro-style offense, and Sam Hartman has stepped into it. And not only has he not missed a beat compared to his high performance at Wake Forest, he actually looks like he's improved in this offense. Sam Hartman is displaying excellent decision-making. He's displaying good accuracy. He looks poised and confident playing within the pocket itself. So Hartman is definitely a riser over the first month of the season. I do think Hartman, more than any other quarterback we've talked about, does have a limited ceiling, but it's absolutely now within the realm of possibilities that he goes as a top 100 selection. And there's one more quarterback here that's going to land in tier 3, and it's somebody who you've probably, if you are a fan of him, you're probably pretty frustrated that I haven't brought his name up. And yes, I'm alluding to Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr. Now, Michael Penix Jr., if you're looking at the box scores, if you're looking statistically, there's maybe nobody in the country that has made a better argument for the Heisman over the first month of the college football season than Michael Penix Jr. himself. So why then does he find himself in tier 3 as opposed to some of the guys like Shedeur Sanders, JJ McCarthy, Quinn Ewers, who are risers in tier 2? And folks, I'm going to keep this simple. It's the injuries. And I know that's frustrating for a lot of folks, but we have to be realistic about it. We can't bypass the injuries. Michael Penix Jr. has had at least 2 significant knee injuries in his college football career. He's had multiple upper body injuries in his college football career. The way the NFL draft process works is you don't go into an NFL team's medical and they don't give you a 1 to 10 scale. Oh, maybe we'll draft this guy, if he falls far enough. He's probably not the most healthy, but we'd still consider him. Once you get through those medicals, you're either on an NFL team's board or you're off an NFL team's board. And if you're off that board, you're not getting drafted by that team. And Michael Penix Jr., unless, I am totally off base on my understanding of his medical history, he's going to be off a significant portion of NFL teams' boards. So, yes, maybe his performance continues to impress over the course of the season to the point where a team's willing to take a top 50 risk on him. I just don't see that happening looking at what I know of past NFL draft trends and the fact that Michael Penix Jr., as we've discussed in this entire episode, is finding himself in a competitive draft class. If he was in a weaker draft class, you could see a team convincing themselves to take the risk on Michael Penix Jr. But they're going to have other options in this draft class. And folks, they're going to have other very good options in this draft class. All right, so I do technically have two more tiers to go here. It's tiers 4 and 5, but you can consider both of these tiers day 3 guys who, if they catch fire and continue building momentum, then they're going to have a shot at going in day 2 of the NFL draft. So for fantasy purposes, this conversation here at this point in the video is more about identifying your guy and seeing who you want to get behind early. And so my tier 4 are the guys who I'm more willing to get behind at this point in the season. And my tier 5 is the guys who I could see catching fire and being popular either day 3 quarterbacks or late day 2 selections. And I know that might not sound like the flashiest thing to log in your brain at this point in time, but every single year, folks, we see these day 3 quarterbacks. They have a positive effect on the NFL draft and on fantasy football teams. I mean, Brock Purdy is the obvious example right now, but there's plenty more that you can dig into. All right, so let's get into here tier 4, and we're going to go ahead and start with Tyler Van Dimes. Yes, Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. Now, he had a pretty good first few weeks of the season, but it was definitely highlighted by a huge 5-touchdown performance against the Texas A&M defense, a good Texas A&M defense with a lot of talent built into it. So Tyler Van Dimes, he's got that prototypical NFL size, and he had really, really good tape in 2021. So it looks like it may have been a combination of injury, offensive coordinator, in 2022. And if Tyler Van Dyke is back and falls within rhythm, he's absolutely going to end up on an NFL roster. Spencer Rattler is also back in the good graces of NFL front offices. Now, heading into the 2021 season, Spencer Rattler was thought to be the guy, like the number 1 overall potential pick in the following year's draft. But Rattler ended up losing his job that season to true freshman Caleb Williams. There was a lot of conversations around mentality, attitude, lack of leadership. So he goes to South Carolina. And quite frankly, folks, he had a pretty forgettable first 2.5 months of his 2022 college football season. Then he lights it up at the end of the season. And he's come back this year and he's looked really, really solid. The decision-making has clearly improved. And what's been really impressive is that Spencer Rattler has been able to perform behind a horrible South Carolina offensive line. He's been consistently under pressure and consistently displaying good decision-making and mental processing. And that's huge because we know Spencer Rattler has the athleticism and we know he has the arm talent. So it truly only is a matter of that mental side of the game. And Spencer Rattler, absolutely among any of the guys that we're going to talk about in tier 4 or 5, can end up being a late day 2 NFL draft selection. All right, so the last guy I'm going to put in this tier here is Tennessee's Joe Milton. Now, I went into this season saying very clearly that if Joe Milton put it all together in his 6th season of college football, if he put it all together, there is no way the NFL would not draft a 6'5", 230-pound quarterback with a massive arm, the best arm in college football. There's no way they wouldn't use a first-round pick on him. Here's the thing. He hasn't put it together. Joe Milton has struggled with deep field accuracy over his first few games of the season against Austin Peay, against Virginia. Joe Milton has not been working through his progressions well. Potentially the most troubling for me is that I haven't seen him use his athleticism. The Tennessee coaching staff is not letting him execute design runs that were critically important to the Josh Heupel offense with Hendon Hooker. All right, so even against Florida, where they needed that spark, needed that boost, they were not having him execute design runs. I think they tried it once or twice, and he didn't look impressive doing it. The mobility was always a huge factor, especially for fantasy football purposes with being in on Joe Milton. And it just doesn't look like he's displaying that this year. I talked about the mental processing and decision-making. If you watch the Tennessee-Florida game, It's clear that the coaching staff, the Tennessee coaching staff, just does not trust Joe Milton. He was hyper targeting his guys at or near the line of scrimmage, even on third down plays like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. They weren't letting him air out the ball. They gave him a couple deep field shots. He hit one of them, but he missed the others. So Joe Milton, he's just not there for me. And I said, it was going to be hit or miss with Joe Milton going into this year, and you can only push it off, further and further, right? At some point, it's not going to click for him. He will get drafted. He will be a day 3 NFL selection because an NFL team is not going to turn away those intangibles and sides. They're simply just not going to do it. Every single coach in the NFL will convince themselves that they can be the one to get Joe Milton to put all the pieces together. And my goodness, I hope they are right, because he will be such a fun player if he does put it all together. But it's just not there, folks. It's just not there right now. But it could be. And because it could be, because I'm telling you there's a chance, he's in tier 4. All right, quickly here, let's move through tier 5. This, quite honestly, is guys that it felt disrespectful to leave off of the episode, so I wanted to make sure that you at least knew their name or knew that I knew their name and that they were on the Rookie Big Board radar. But of course, you could know whether or not they're on the Rookie Big Board radar by being in the Rookie Big Board Discord, because you could chop it up and ask me questions about any of these prospects that I've been talking about this entire episode, or just drop a comment on this video. I'd be happy to talk about any of these guys as well. Quarterback Kyle McCord out of Ohio State. He's had a slow start to the season. It looks like he might finally be catching on and catching momentum. And we know that if at the end of the day, the Ohio State quarterback performs at a high level with decent intangibles, then he's going to be considered at least as a day 3 NFL draft selection. Quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU, that's my guy. He'll never be off the radar. I do think he's probably, settling more into a day 3 selection. I think he could have had a shot to be a top 100 selection, and he still could if he really puts together the numbers this year, because I think we know the athleticism is there. And I think we've seen those flashes of his arm talent, but we need to put it all together there with Jaden Daniels. Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, is rising. He's showing off his mobility this year. He's showing off his ability to slice and dice from within the pocket. I do think that there's a ceiling, though, when it comes to Jackson Dart, but I definitely think he needs to be on the NFL draft radar. A guy who was on the NFL draft radar kind of as he transitioned up from FCS to FBS last year was Cam Ward. And Cam Ward didn't have a super impressive 2022 season, but he certainly didn't have as bad of a season as I think some folks have made it out to be. And now he's come out early on in 2023 and he's looked good as well. Ward is another guy that combines mobility and arm talent, and so he needs to be on your radar. And the last guy I'll mention is Jordan Travis out of Florida State. There's a lot of folks who are high on Jordan Travis, a lot of folks who think he could be a top 100 selection. When I look at his mechanics, when I look at his even the way that he wins in college, like that mobility, that huck it, chuck it kind of focus, it works for college, and he's a great college quarterback. I just don't see the translation to the NFL game, and I don't see the translation to being a consistent fantasy football producer. So that's why I'm not talking about Jordan Travis nearly as much as everybody else, but he's certainly a name that's going to be on the radar. So there you have it, 16 quarterbacks broken up into 5 tiers from the 2024 class. The big takeaway here is that it's a strong quarterback class, and it only has the potential to get stronger here over the next few months of the college football season. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, drop a comment, tell me what you thought about the video, ask me questions about any of these prospects, and if you want more rookie big board action, the link is in this episode description for patreon.com/rookiebigboard, or try out the Rookie Big Board Discord to get a little bit of sample of what we got going on for free. And as always, I appreciate you checking out this episode of the Rookie Big Board.